Welcome to Three Principles Conversations with Christian McNeill, a series of conversations with Three Principles practitioners exploring a new explanation of how humans work. Insight into this understanding can help transform quality of life, relationships, and state of mind.
So, hello and welcome to this edition of Three Principles Conversation with me, Christian McNeill. And today, my delightful guest is Barbara Sarah Smith, with whom I co-authored Addiction: One Cause, One Solution, available from all good booksellers and Amazon. And Barbara is an American psychotherapist currently living in the Azores. And it's an absolute delight to have you here, Barbara. We were discussing between ourselves in the past few days something about the kind of mind-body connection and the relevance of the three principles and so on. And we will come on to that because it intrigued me, and it's also something that I have some personal experience of, as well as experience with clients. But before we go there, tell listeners or viewers a bit about you, who you are, how you came to be in the role that you occupied in your working life, and how you came across the three principles.
Okay, well, it's nice to see you. It's nice to hear all these Scottish accents again, and to be working with you, Christian. Um, so I was a psychotherapist for many years, about 40 years. And at one point, I just started getting really burned out. I really started to question whether what we were doing was actually helping people. And I was not at a place where I could retire yet. So I was sort of searching around, and I was going to leave the field and write a book, and just didn't know what I was doing. So I was introduced circuitously to Annika Hurwitz, um, who started talking about the principles work. I had no idea what she was talking about, but there was something in it that just really appealed to me. There was something about the wisdom. There was something about I don't even know that I could put words to what it was that attracted me, but it was very. I thought I'd like to know more about that, so I started working with her, and eventually went on an intensive, a 3-day intensive, and started to have very profound insights into the nature of what was going on with me in my life in terms of my thinking. And it took a long time really for me to catch on to sort of what it was all about and the simplicity behind a lot of it. But anyway, that's what happened. And then I brought it back to my practice, and a number of people left because they wanted to have traditional psychotherapy. But I would say the vast majority of people were like, wow, why didn't anybody ever tell me this before? And they started getting better, and that was really wonderful. And so I sort of, as I'm known to do, threw myself into uh, the work and did it for, gosh, I guess about 8 or 9 years, and then started to have some questions about that as well, and started think more broadly about the human condition, and that's sort of where I am at this point. And so that's, I guess, what we want to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, could I just just for anyone in our audience who doesn't know you said that some people left your practice when you pivoted into a more of a three principles approach because they wanted traditional psychotherapy. What are the kind of bullet points of the difference, just for the sake of the lay listener?
Sure. Well, I think for a lot of people, they just wanted someone in relationship that would listen to them on a weekly basis. We were using an old model. We were using the model I was trained with, which was that your misery is coming from the circumstances in your life. And so I was still giving them lots of tools to handle their pain, and you have to keep coming back for that because the tools may work for a little while, but nothing really changes. So I think that's where my frustration grew out of. So people were really, I think some people felt really abandoned, because we were working in one course and then I switched course. And I think, I was their primary source of support in listening to them. This may sound harsh, and I don't mean to, but to listening to them sort of prolong their agony. So I think they felt abandoned, that we weren't going to keep doing that anymore, or that I couldn't listen in the same way anymore. I couldn't be as compassionate to see it once I saw that, but that's not where your pain is coming from. I really think they felt abandoned in that. So that was the difference. I think before it was we were focusing on what had happened to them, and really giving a lot of sympathy and a lot of, we're sort of treading water.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that, because when I came across the principles, I wasn't working as a coach as I do now. I did have I had trained in various other fields like NLP and hypnotherapy and so on. So I had a tiny kind of sideline of a private practice, but I was working as a lawyer at that point. But I also had a lot of friends in the recovery community, some of whom are very caught up in that model of, I am the victim of my childhood usually, or the abuse that has happened to me elsewhere, and they sincerely believed that, and I was very interested in that, and a lot of our conversations together would be around that stuff. And then I just suddenly saw this is a misunderstanding. It's an innocent misunderstanding. It feels true because it doesn't seem like whatever struggles I have emotionally or personally are coming from my thinking in this moment. It seems like this is happening to me, not coming through me. But then when I saw it differently, I thought, no, really, that is that is the cause and effect. Those people dropped me like a hot potato because I was no longer in that conversation. And I also, the truth is I was no longer miserable. I was no longer, that one of our connections was unhappiness, our shared unhappiness. And again, completely innocently. And it's interesting, I've run into some of them over the years since, and I just see it's tragic really, because they just seem to be stuck there, still going over the same old stuff, and anyway, I'm very grateful to have discovered what I discovered, which was a massive shift for me, massive turning point in my life, and from which point things really became much, much happier. No, so turning more to, so this week you sent me something, an article on Facebook a woman had written about the kind of somatization, and how awareness of where problems are coming from didn't necessarily solve the problem of somatization. And to put it in a nutshell, since we don't have the article in front of us, or I don't, and it's really interesting, and it has occurred to me that one of the issues, I think, is that I think that the terms mind, thought, and consciousness, which are the terms of the three principles, are peculiarly unhelpful. And I actually first came across it years and years ago. I mean, 35 years ago. But because of the word thought, what the three principles are pointing to is that thought in the moment, powered by mind and consciousness, is what is creating our emotional distress, and what's covering up the wellspring of power that's available to us. But because that word thought was, just clearly implied to me what I know I'm thinking, even then I thought this isn't my problem. My problem is not what I know I'm thinking, because at that point I was newly getting sober. I had issues with other sort of compulsive behaviors where I would just suddenly find myself doing something I didn't want to be doing, like smoking or, eating crap or, in a destructive relationship. It didn't seem like I was thinking about, oh, this would be a good idea. I just found it happening to me is how it appeared. And it's only on the sort of second go round that I've come to understand that thought really refers to everything that's happening, that all the processing that is coming through me moment to moment, most of which, like an iceberg, is below the surface of awareness, um, and I think that so it struck me when I read the article that you sent me, that and the woman made the point of something like, awareness isn't enough. But I thought awareness is not necessarily insight. That I would agree that awareness is not enough to change. Awareness that I'm addicted to smoking wasn't enough to stop me smoking. Awareness, as I mentioned at the outset, I had a couple of instances well, probably never mind, a couple, dozens of instances of somatization, which I didn't know initially was somatization. So one was, I used to get this thing which is called irritable bowel syndrome, and really, and again, that's not a good name, because really what it is a chronic pain in the gut, which is happening because part of the gut has peristalsis working normally, so forcing food through, and other bits that is in a spasm, so it's kind of hitting a block. And now I knew none of that at the time. All I knew was this would go on for days and days and days, and I tried all sorts of things. And then unrelated to that, I started learning meditation because it was part of the recovery program. And I found after I'd been meditating regularly for a couple of weeks that the IBS just cleared up for good. So all of that happened at below the level of consciousness. I did not know that the problem was created by me entertaining stressful thoughts, which put the body into the sort of fight or flight mode, which is why digestion stops in some areas. But and I did not know that the meditation kind of removed that kind of cause and effect. But it was just it's only in retrospect that I see, oh, that's what was going on there. So I didn't even have a conscious insight around it, but I did have the change because the driver was no longer there. And then another one was just constant back and neck and shoulder pain, which again I now see was caused by stress. Stressful thinking, entertaining stressful, stuck thinking. But it had a massive improvement in that on one occasion when the night that I left a very difficult relationship. I just again, I didn't know that was going to happen. And I just noticed that after the break had been made, my back was just suddenly released. It was just really astonishing. And again, it's only with hindsight that I see, oh, that's what was going on. I had, followed wisdom and taken the right step instead of, repeating the pattern of, staying in quite an abusive situation, and kind of freed myself up. Those are just some of the observations I've had, and the unhelpfulness of thought to describe everything that's going on in us, conscious, or for me, mostly unconscious. Most of the problematic stuff has been unconscious, at least until after the event, I would say. I'm just wondering, what do you make of all that, Barbara, and how does it?
I definitely think that's the way it works. I mean, I think from, I think the interesting thing, and you and I really grappled with this around the whole addiction piece, is that, um, you know, when does this happen for people? Some people can be in AA for 60 years and finally the penny will drop and they'll get sober. Other people can see in college, boy, I can't handle this stuff and I need to stop. So I guess there's no question that I had a similar experience, Christian, with back pain, with lower back pain, and I read a book by John Sarno, Dr.
Oh,
John
he's
Sarno.
great.
He
He's
is
great.
great. Yeah, and somebody handed me that book, because I was in agony. I thought I was going to have to give up psychotherapy. I couldn't sit all day. I mean, I was in agony. My back was in spasm, and she handed me John Sarno's book, and he said it's unconscious holding, and just tell your back basically to knock it off. And I did, and it stopped, and so a lifelong issue of pain was gone when I became.
Could I just interrupt for a minute, just to not so much for our sake, but again for anybody listening, unconscious holding, it seems to me, is just another aspect of thought, and that's the difficulty, because it doesn't seem like thought in any normal sense of that word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Sorry. Anyway, I interrupted you. Please do go on.
Yeah. So I think when you realize that to some, and again, this is where we're going to talk about where things may shift, but when you can see that is possible, and you can experience, you can look back at your own life, like I said, in hindsight, and see that not only was it possible, but that it's been happening your whole life. The more awareness you get, the more released you can be from from the things that are keeping you in unhealthy patterns. But the quote that, and just to talk briefly about what I sent you, and I'm sorry I wasn't as prepared as I would like to have been today. But the quote that I sent you, or the article I sent you, was by a woman named Marion Woodman, or at least quoted heavily from Marion Woodman. Marion Woodman was a Jungian analyst who was a brilliant woman. I could never really understand any of her work, but any of her writings at all. But she was brilliant. But this was really interesting, and I'm having difficulty locating my phone where I had it spelled out. Just give me 1 second. Here it is. Okay. So the quote that I really loved in that was part of what I thought we might want to talk about is that my spiritual knowing is far beyond my body's capacity to incarnate it. So what I saw in my clients, and I'm just going to actually talk about myself, that I've had tremendous insights. Like you, the principles changed my life completely. When I saw that my thinking processes, that I was attached to some of the thought that I held, that I believed was true about me and about my life. Once I saw that, I was really freed up. But to a certain degree, but not fully. And even to this day, I see it in myself. I see old patterns repeating. I'll start obsessing about something. I can see what's happening. I see it as clear as the day is long. I see it right there. But my body is still doing the old patterning. And I think that was true for a lot of my clients. They had these tremendous insights. They realized they weren't sick. They didn't have all these diagnoses. That was one of the most freeing things for me, was to move away from the traditional psychotherapy model that pathologized so much of what goes on in the human condition. But then they'd come back and say, "But I can't seem to shake this." And then they would get caught in a and I don't think I was as compassionate as I could have been, because I was under the belief that it was all thought, and it was just, once you had these insights, you were going to feel much better. But I really like the fact that it may be a much slower process. And for many people, as you know, in recovery, you can be sober and still walk around with lots and lots and lots and lots of issues that never seem to resolve in the course of a lifetime.
Yeah, well, I was that soldier until I discovered this. But what's interesting to me is that I think there's a difference between awareness and insight. So sometimes, as it seems happened with you when you read Sarno's book, the awareness and the insight, or either awareness is enough, or the awareness triggered an insight. And I had something like that with smoking. I for a lot, nearly the whole time I smoked, which was, I don't know, 15, 20 years, something like that. Um, I was at war with myself over it. I hated it, and so I knew that it wasn't a good thing, but I couldn't stop it. And then I read how I forgot to say the How to Stop Smoking. I can't remember that, but there's a famous book that has helped many people, and there was one line in that, and he was saying basically the cigarette you take now seems to relieve the craving, but actually it's setting up the next craving. And there was something in that information that triggered an insight that enabled me to stop. But but it didn't. In that case, it didn't. It wasn't the first time I read it. It was on multiple readings, and then at some point, awareness turned into an insight. And it seems to me that there's something of grace to insights. It's not insights on demand. I think this is one of the things. I imagine it sounds like you're describing much the same thing with your clients, that people are saying, well, how do I get, constant peace, no more of my isms, no more of my issues? And think, well, we don't get that. That what is on offer while we're in the human dimension, and whatever else might happen is beyond my pay grade. But while we're in the human dimension, I think we have the opportunity for sort of great leaps forward through insight, but we still then are up and down, up and down. Now I see it, now I don't. And and I think um, one of the consequences, one of the outcomes of this work for me is just to be comfortable with that. In fact, I found it really incredibly reassuring that you're going to have some variability for the rest of your life. I mean, nobody even knows that. Maybe I'll have a complete enlightenment experience tomorrow, or be in the depths of hell. Who knows? But I think I'm very comfortable with being, some variability, because prior to discovering the principles, I was on a mission of sort of constant and never-ending improvement. That was my drive. It wasn't working, of course, but it was my drive. And just to give that up and think, oh, I can. Oh, if this is it, up and down, I can cope with that. And and I think that's the misunderstanding, that the principles never becomes a tool of the ego that we can kind of roll out and make ourselves feel better in the instant. It seems to me, and I don't know what you make of that, Barbara.
I would agree. I don't think it's anything we can roll out. I think, as you said, it's far beyond my pay grade to know when it's going to roll out. And I think to realize that it it's not always easy, even with insight. I know you're making a distinction between awareness and insight, but even with insight, because I've had plenty of them, and I still get into things where again, it frees me up to some degree, but it doesn't mean that it's gone. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah. But
that,
why would it? Why would you expect it to?
well, I don't, but I'm just saying, I think that that's one of the cautionary things about the principle and about our idea of talking about insight as these aha moments, which are built into our system. And it is remarkable. My business was called Gifts of Insight, and I still am greatly, greatly moved and touched by that um, uh, awareness. Just bringing into focus how that part of our design works. Um, but I think even with the greatest of insights, and I've seen people, and you have too, who have gotten sober and have done really well for a long period of time, and then they got they stumbled because they got caught up with some other thinking, or the belief that the tragedy that just happened in their life is unbearable without the support of alcohol or whatever. And I think I wanted to be, I guess, and it may have been my issue. It may have been my issue that I still am working through to some degree after 45 years in the field of psychotherapy. But I think that it is, we have to be careful to not um, give people the idea that this is going to in any way supersede your humanity and the complexity. I know that we say in the principles it's simple, it's very simple. I don't think humans are simple. And so that's sort of what I'm struggling with. And I think the more that I can celebrate the mystery of our complexity and really hold that, um, at some point to say to people, insight, and it's very changing. And yet still we as humans can get really caught, I believe, and you and I have had this discussion before about things in people who've had long-term trauma. There's physicality to it. Bessel van der Kolk and others in the trauma field, Gabor Mate, all have pointed to some of the neurological changes that can happen. Now, I don't know. I don't know how it works. And I'm much more comfortable saying I don't know how it works than holding out. I don't mean to disregard the principles. It's life change. It was life changing for me. It continues to be, and for my clients. And instead of either or, and both, I think we are very complex creatures, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I still struggle with certain things in my life that come up at 3 in the morning, and I'm grinding on them in my head, and but I can also have the distance to step back and look at that and see, wow, I just turned 73 years old and I'm still doing this. Isn't that interesting? You know, Still doing this. 73. Wow. So I think that for me, I look back at the people who left my practice and felt abandoned by my unwillingness, and it was an unwillingness at that point to listen in the same way to their issues. I think in some regards that was a good thing, but in others it wasn't as good a thing. So, again, it's something I'm wrestling with at this point, even though I'm retired now and I don't really have to wrestle with it anymore. But, I find things like that article, and I'm happy to keep engaging in the conversation of how it works and how we can, as human beings, move forward in a way that doesn't keep propagating misery. And there certainly is a great deal of that in life right now. You see the power that thought has to convince us of things that are so wrong. They're so. I mean, how many times have we all been caught in things you think, wow, this was it? This was the be all and end all, or and just to begin to say, wait, slow down. Let's really think about this. And I think that was what I started to do with the principles. Like, let's just think about this a little bit more clearly and see if in fact there is a way to expand on what the principles have to offer. Which, again, for me was life changing. For many, many of my clients was life changing. So that's where I am at this point.
Yeah, I think one thing I'm reminded of is, of course, that the principles are not a therapy; that they are that they are a description of what's going on, including in you know trauma or grief or somatization, that they are a description of, what the building blocks are. And on one level, it is very kind of simple, but equally, how it plays out in an individual's life does have enormous complexity. But I think it can be incredibly useful just to have a sense of that upstream. The fundamental building blocks are this, which to my mind creates much more hope than anything that I'd ever come across before. That and that what I'm up against, it's not. There is nothing outside of myself that has an independent power to create my misery. But having said that, it doesn't mean that I'm going to skip through life without a moment of pain or discomfort or even misery at times. That can happen, but it does seem to me that part of the system that we are as human beings is that emotional pain and even physical pain. I mean, not physical pain if you get knocked over or drop a hammer on your foot, but physical pain of that type of the shoulders, the back, that kind of stuff, the IBS that I had, they are actually part of the kind of the inbuilt biofeedback system. Once you know what's going on, to say, you're using your mind against yourself. Have just a gentle tap to waken up. And like you, I mean, in many ways, I would say that I live a life with very few problems today compared to how I was, because everything that I thought was useful was actually making my problems worse. Analysis, endlessly talking about it, the wrong cause and effect identified, and so on and so forth. So none of that's really happening today. And yet I have issues with sleeping. And I know it's not that my body's forgotten how to sleep. It's such a the thing that I strongly suspect is going on is that I am micro stimulated on a daily basis. And, so thought is at work. I am innocently using thought against myself. I have some awareness into that. I haven't yet had a deep insight into what to do differently. But the sleep issue, if you like, I see as a feedback system saying, you're just subtly using your mind against yourself here. Just what could you do? How might you do less of that? How might you entertain less of, whatever it is I read on social media or the news or whatever. And I'm kind of fine with that. It's never seemed to me that the principles is a route to nirvana, but it's an explanation of what's going on, good or bad, in an individual's experience.
Well, I think again, our book, we worked hard on Addiction: One Cause, One Solution.
Available from all booksellers, folks.
Well done. But I think we both wrestled with, the fact that we had never really seen people get sober with the principles alone. That the principles could be a helpful adjunct once you dealt with some of the other issues on the table. And got sober and had the clarity of your brain function to begin to grasp some of the really wonderful wisdom of the 12 steps. So I mean, I think again, as an adjunct, is it the adjunct, is it, and then again, there are people who have an insight and they say, that's it, I'm done. So who knows, but
that's a really good point, Barbara. And it strikes me that, again, it's back to the principles not being a therapy or but having the understanding of what's going on. So equally, someone could have innocently created physical illness in their body, such as heart disease or diabetes, through their lifestyle choices, but without realizing it. Now, the principles isn't necessarily going to be that the first stop might be the GP or the cardiologist or whatever. It's not but the immediate prompt, the immediate presenting problem requires some different kind of intervention, but an awareness of how that person has innocently contributed to their situation can be enormously helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a place for. I remember when I first learned the principles, I was like, "Oh, you don't need to meditate. Oh, you don't need to do this. Oh, you don't need to. You don't need that. You know." And I think then in my own life, I've come back to a number of those things just to realize, you're human, kiddo, and this is entering this stage of our lives, my life. You know, coming in on the home stretch. Um, it, Things are changing in ways that I feel much more humbled by. Uh, I had a near death experience last fall, and that was very powerful experience for me. I wasn't necessarily afraid, but it shifted things for me internally that I'd never expected would happen. I always thought, oh, I'm good with death. I get it. I'm going to die when I'm going to die, and intellectually that seemed like I had it under control. But then I got there, and it was like, wow. So I think to see that life is complicated, and we are complicated, and the principles offer a simple solution that I don't think is the full solution. And again, we're going to probably be discussing this till the cows come home, which is good. I mean, I think it's important for us to bring that up. And I've heard some things from you today that have reminded me about things that I may have forgotten. But I guess I want for myself and for other people to hear that as what a powerful message the principles offer, and the principles, like other spiritual teachers for since the beginning of time, really, the Buddha on down, the power that thought has, to create misery in our lives or to create suffering. And once you start to see that, you get released to some degree. But I've never seen anybody who's been fully released in every aspect of their life. And that's okay too. I mean, that's the way we work. And we can just, to whatever extent you are holding on to um, and identifying with the thinking that you have, you're, and even though much of that may be unconscious, but I think there's some things that for many people, and again, I see this with myself in certain areas now at this point in my life where it's like, this is really interesting to me that this could be so long lasting and so powerful, um, in a way that I think for people who first enter the principles with the expectation of f- complete and total freedom.
Yeah, that's the rub, isn't it? Because I've never had that. I've never seen it as that, but I've seen it as it is a complete explanation of what's going on, but there's no promise that you're getting out of being human. I've never thought that, and I've found that comforting.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I think it is too. I think it's very comforting when we can embrace our humanity and see that we're. And one of the things that I'm trying to I remember talking with Keith Blevins about this, the term fully human and fully divine.
Barbara, that is a great point. Were you going to say something else about it? Because I was thinking that's a great point. Barbara, thank you so much for making the time and joining us from the Azores. It's lovely to see you. Lovely to see a bit of your new house, and it's been a really
Take a little glimpse.
a really interesting and thought provoking for me conversation. So I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you again, and thanks for inviting me on.